In Chapter 25 of Conquest with Zero Strength and Magic, Ryoma challenges Corrin to a duel, which will take a very long time because the damage output on both sides is minimal. Corrin doesn't do much damage because she has zero strength and magic, and Ryoma won't be doing much damage either because Corrin's defense is very high. On top of all of this, there is an aura effect in the room which reduces all damage taken to 1/4 of the original value. With all these factors in play, it's barely enough to overcome the 2 HP heal per turn that both characters are granted. Thus, nearly all lasting damage from either side will mainly be inflicted through skills or critical hits. And funnily enough, Ryoma's Rend Heaven skill will be ineffective because the bonus damage is based on Corrin's strength. All that said, my focus on this chapter will not be on the duel, but rather on the rest of the map. Winning by defeating Ryoma will be relatively simple, but I have another objective in mind because the final few maps will be extremely difficult. In Chapter 23, I lost several important Master Ninjas, and this map is a perfect opportunity to replenish my ranks. The sides of this map are full of Master Ninjas with Inevitable End, which is an enemy-only skill that allows debuffs to stack infinitely. These enemies are arrayed in multiple stationary setups that are extremely difficult to survive because nearly all of them have Poison Strike, Savage Blow, or Grisly Wound. Normally, you would only fight these enemies if Corrin isn't strong enough to win the duel with Ryoma, but in my case, engaging them will actually work out in my favor. And this is because these Master Ninjas are excellent candidates for capture. They are level 15, so they can be trained to get the Replicate skill relatively quickly, and some even have Savage Blow. So when fully built, they can have a nearly identical build as the ones I have for Kaze, Camilla, and Midori. Since fighting the enemies on this map fairly is extremely difficult, I decided to use an easier method, which is through a unit sacrifice. I bring a whole bunch of useless generic units that I captured in previous chapters and use them as bait. I sacrifice a Sky Knight from Chapter 10 to bait out 3 Savage Flow Master Ninjas to the left, and I managed to successfully capture all of them, securing 3 incredibly useful units. The next section on the left is extremely lethal because the formation will not move until you can be attacked by 3 ranged lunge enemies, which will throw units across a wall where they will be surrounded and immediately killed by half a dozen enemies. The only real reward for this part of the map is a Silent Staff, which I can't use effectively because my staff users have zero magic. So I then move to the right to fight more enemies and capture more Master Ninjas. The enemies on the lower right are relatively easy to handle, but the next section on the right is an extremely deadly narrow hallway. Most of the enemies are stationary and will not budge until you move into the overlapping attack ranges, which will combine an overwhelming amount of percent max HP damage. Even in a normal playthrough, it is very difficult to survive this area, and none of my units are up to the task. So I decided to break up the enemy formation by sending in sacrificial units. I sent in a generic General Sniper pair-up and they both die, baiting out some of the units, and then I sent in a generic Armyology to bait out even more. This is enough to clear all the enemies from the hallway, allowing me to launch hit and run attacks that are much more survivable. After a slow process of whittling down the enemies, I managed to capture 3 more Grisly Wound Master Ninjas and break through the formation to defeat Kagero. If I wanted the rest of my units to assist Corrin in the duel, I will need to clear the left side and defeat Saizo. At this point, I have run out of units I'm willing to sacrifice on this map, so I then turn my focus to have Corrin defeat Ryoma alone. At this point, we are well past the 20 turn limit and Ryoma has become aggressive, attacking Corrin repeatedly from 2 range. Unfortunately, the damage from Ryoma's critical hits and Astra activations adds up and Corrin takes a lot of damage. It is very difficult to assist Corrin from outside the chamber, but I managed to use a loophole to sneak Corrin some extra healing by parking one of my Amaterasu Spearmasters just outside the paper screen. This heals Corrin for 20% of her max HP every turn, which is more than enough to survive attacks indefinitely. That said, Corrin can barely do any damage as she's not fast enough to double and her Levin Sword can't crit or activate skills, so my only option is to attack from one range with the Grim Yato, but the damage there is also not enough to overcome Ryoma's passive healing. But I managed to use a trick to use rally skills over the wall to boost Corrin's stats. I buffed Corrin's strength, speed, and skill with one of the Amaterasu Spearmasters and attacked Ryoma, allowing her to double and occasionally land critical hits and activate skills. But unfortunately, she is unable to enemy phase because Ryoma will just attack from 2 range with the Regento. By repeatedly attacking multiple times, Corrin is eventually able to land enough Astras and critical hits to whittle down Ryoma's HP, and after quite a while, I finally managed to get him low enough to defeat him. And to land the final blow, I decided to have Mozu shoot him from outside the room. After Ryoma commits suicide to preserve Corrin's moral purity, I go to the prison to recruit 6 newly captured Master Ninjas. If I train all of them to get Replicate and add them to Kaze, Camilla, and Midori, I will be able to have as many as 18 Poison Strikers, 12 with Savage Blow, and 6 with Grisly Wound, which will allow for a truly ridiculous amount of percent max HP damage.